Hey everyone, I'm Jeffrey Way. Welcome to a new edition of the screencast of the week. Today we're going to be mixing PHP, jQuery, and SimplePie to create a news scroller. So I had one of you emailed me asking if I could do this. More than happy to. Let's take a look at what our final outcome is. Just a simple news scroller. It's using SimplePie to grab the most recent tutorials on net.touch+, and then we're using jQuery to create the scroll effect. Okay, you'd be surprised this is actually quite easy thanks to jQuery. So let's go ahead and build it. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our RSS feed and consider signing up for our Plus account. It's $9, gives you access to screencasts, freebies, and really high quality tutorials. So it's a great deal. Please check it out if you're interested. Let's close this out. And I'm going to create a new website. And we're just going to call this news scroller. And within it, let's get started. I'm going to add a new text file, and we're going to call this index.php. All right. And just do a little more cleanup. Okay. So let's give it a title. And at the very top, we're going to use SimplePie to pull in the information, but we need to grab SimplePie. If you watched the screencast last week, you'll know how to do that. Let me see. I think I have a copy stored somewhere. Now let's just go into my test file, and I'm going to grab SimplePie. Once again, if you're not familiar, go ahead and watch last week's screencast, and it's actually very easy. If you need this file, just go to simplepie.org and you can download it. But don't worry, this is a very small part of the tutorial, so we're not gonna duplicate anything that we did last week. So the first thing that we should do is open up PHP, and we need to require that file. So we'll do requires simplepie.inc. And next, let's create a new variable called feed, and that's going to be equal to a new instance of the SimplePie class, and we're just going to pass in the URL. We could even type nettouch.com, but we can just add RSS. Although I should do it the new way, shouldn't I? touchplus.com/RSS. Okay. Next, we need to set up feed, handle content type. You should just do this with each one. And that should be all we need to get the feed imported. Within our container div, let's just get started. H1, super duper news scroller. And within small tags, I'm going to type built with PHP, SimplePie, and jQuery. Okay, that looks good. And let's create an unordered list. We'll give it an ID of just widgets, fine, something like that. And within it, let's create our first list item. And here's where we're going to add our PHP. So I'm going to do PHP echo item get description. But before I do this, I need to add a for each statement, don't I? So after our widget, we'll do PHP for each, and then we're going to do the feed variable that we created, get items. And within parentheses, I can describe how I want to get them. So I want to start with the very first item, and for this example, let's just grab the first 3. But we can make it more if we want. We could grab the first 10. Doesn't matter. So for each feed get items, and then we're going to assign a temporary variable called item. We'll do the shorthand alternative syntax for each statements, and then at the very bottom, we'll close that out. So PHP end for each. Okay, now let's return to our item. So now item is referring to that specific item in the RSS feed. Okay, so echo out item and gets description. Next, let's create an h4 tag, and the href of this link needs to send us directly to that specific tutorial on the website. So we can do PHP echo item, and we're going to use a different one called get permalink. If you guys use WordPress, you're probably very familiar with that. And the value of this is going to be PHP echo item get title. Okay, close out the anchor tag, close out the h4 tag. Okay, that looks right. And next, let's add a paragraph tag. And this is just going to store the date. So we can do... Actually, we're not going to add a link. Let's just echo out echo item get date. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. Let's go ahead and see what this gives us in the browser. So let's open up this tiny screen. Where is it? Firefox. And I'm going to browse to localhost. And come on down, and what did we call this? News scroller. There it is. Okay, and as you would expect, it's pulling in the links. Now it's giving us this warning, cache is not writable, and that's because simply I haven't created a cache folder. So we'll do that right now. But yeah, that's how you spell it. Cache. Okay, come back, refresh the page, and now that's gone. So it's pulling in the very first 3 entries. Looks good. But let's add a little bit of CSS. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab what we have here, just so I don't have to type it. We'll copy that, come back, and then I'll just go over it with you. Style.css. Come in here. I don't have any of these. Let's get rid of those. And it's a style sheet, and it's style.css. Come back, refresh the page. Okay, and this is what we're given. So I'm going to edit CSS just to take a look at what we have here. Okay, very simple, just setting the font size to 10 pixels in the body. If we remove that, it gets a little bit bigger, so I want it to be somewhat small. Container div, this is our wrapping div for the entire thing. So if I set background to red, you can see that. Yeah, and actually I should add overflow hidden there. I'll do that later. Adding overflow hidden just to make sure that it clears anything that's floated. It's just kind of standard practice. You know, we have a list item, h4 tag, just getting rid of that standard bullet that comes with each one. What else? Anchor tags, no text decoration, the color is black. When you hover over an anchor tag, it's underlined. Okay, small tag, remember we had our h4, and then within the h4 tag I also added this small tag right here. I'm setting display to block to make sure that it shows up on its own line, you see there. Set the font size to 11 pixels, no font weight, because by default it's going to inherit the h4's font weight. So get rid of that, and just a gray color. Widget, now this is... The widget is actually our main container. So we've given it padding 1em all around, you see there. Gives it some breathing room, just kind of a darker gray border. We gave it a specific height, and we'll go into this just a little bit more. I know how all of these images are going to be displayed, so I can use jQuery to figure out exactly how much I need to scroll to make sure that this next item is perfectly on top. We'll go into that a little bit more. I've set a width of 310 pixels, or better yet, a minimum width. And we have Firefox styling. I could even add the WebKit as well if we wanted to, and it's just rounding that bottom right corner. Hardly necessary. Okay, all of the images within the widget, which is going to be these these little sample images, we're floating them to the left. So we could do that to the right. It's very easy. We set a border around each image, and I also set a little bit of padding just to give a little bit of breathing room around the image. And then just some margins to the right. We get rid of that just to give it some space. And I set a specific width. So if I get rid of that, they're going to be much bigger. It's going to be the actual size on the website, which is 200 by 200. Okay. Now, widget li, we're clearing each one to the left because we floated an image. So you always need to make sure you clear your floats. We set overflow to hidden, position to relative, top 0. We'll go over that a little bit more. The H4 tag is these little titles right here. So once again, just set some padding on top. You see, that's what it would look like by default. And I can get rid of that span, that's not necessary. And an overlay. So overlay, actually, that's for something I may go into maybe in a future tutorial. So you can see here, very simple, nothing too much to go over. But we haven't created any of the scrolling functionalities, so let's go ahead and do that right now. I think this is something that would work well as a very simple plugin. I could imagine in multiple projects implementing some kind of news scroller. So when you can say that to yourself, that means go ahead and turn it into a plugin. It doesn't require that much more work. So let's come down to the bottom of our page and import jQuery. And let's go ahead and imagine how we're going to call it. So we'll probably do it something like a get widget, and widget is referring to this unordered list. And what is our plugin name going to be called? Let's call it news scroll. Okay, so now we know how we're going to call it. Let's clean this up just a bit. Let's go ahead and create it. So I'm going to create a new file, and we'll save it, and we're going to call it jQuery dot and then the name of our file. So news scroll.js. All right. So first, let's create a self-invoking anonymous function. So okay, and this is just a way, for those of you that don't know, it allows us to use the jQuery symbol without having to worry about it conflicting with other JavaScript libraries. So let's begin our plugin. So we'll do jQuery dot prototype dot and then the name of our plugin is going to be news scroll. And that's going to be equal to a function, and we're also going to allow just a couple options. This is hardly going to be a very advanced plugin. It's just a way to kind of keep our script in kind of a one location, and that made no sense. But let's continue on. We'll do var and do defaults, and we'll create a new object, and the defaults are going to be, if the user doesn't pass any options or any parameters when they call this plugin, we'll just use the defaults. So one of them is going to be speed, and this is going to be how quickly the transition occurs when it scrolls up. I'm going to do, by default, 400 milliseconds, which is about a half a second. And the next one, list item height. What we need to do to make this work easily without having to do too much work is I'm setting a specific height to each one of these list items. So if I hover over this, if I can find it, there's one. And you see that has a specific height, 96 pixels. We do the next one, that one has 96 pixels too. So we want to make sure each one is 96 pixels just to make it easy to work with. So list item height, by default, I'm going to set that to 109 pixels because we are going to have some padding and borders and all of that. Okay, that should be just fine for the defaults. Let's also create another one called settings, and that's going to be jQuery.extend to new object, and we're going to merge defaults and options. Okay, so create a new variable. It's going to be an empty object, and we're going to take whatever the user types for these settings and override whatever the defaults are, and it's going to be stored in a new object with the name of settings. And then when we access these values, we'll use settings. So for instance, if the user specifies speed but not list item height, then their speed will take precedence, but we'll still use the default list item height. And the way we would access that would be something like settings.speed. Okay? Very simple. Next, I'm going to cache this. So let's create a variable called jQuery this, and it's just going to be equal to the jQuery object. And I think that's good. So next, we will use a function called setInterval. And basically, the way setInterval works is we can specify how often we want whatever is contained within that code to occur. So if we set it to 3000, every 3 seconds, the code within is going to run. Okay, as opposed to something like set timeout, where that's only going to run once. So we'll do set interval and right here we'll specify how long we want it to take. 3000, we want it to do every 3000 milliseconds. Now if we wanted, we could even make that an option, okay? But I don't want to get too complicated because this isn't specifically a jQuery tutorial. So we need to make sure ultimately we return the jQuery object, so we'll do return the cached this dot children li first dot animate, and we're just going to do the margin top, and we need to do camel casing when using jQuery. It's going to be negative plus settings dot list item height, and opacity is hide. Okay, so get this dot children. Remember, this is referring to the unordered list, refers to the UL that was passed in. So get the very first list item and animate it. And we are going to take that very first list item, meaning this one at the very top right here, and we're going to animate it, and we're going to take the margin top and pull it negative list item height. So if the list item height is 109 pixels like this, it's going to set the margin equal to negative 109 pixels, and that's going to push it up. And when it pulls this image up, it's going to pull up everything below it as well. So settings.listItemHide, and then also I'm setting the opacity to hide, and that's the same as setting opacity to 0. It's going to hide over the course of however long we set. In this case, it's going to be speed, 400 milliseconds. So we can add that right here. Settings.speed. And then finally, I want to add a callback function. And a callback function is just something that runs as soon as in this case, as soon as the animation has completed. And for the callback function, you can imagine when we pull this up, it's going to, because I've set overflow to hidden, we're not going to be able to see this one on top anymore. But we want to make sure that we get rid of that, because if we just keep scrolling up, we're going to have 50 list items. So what we want to do is take that one on top, once it completes, and it should be like up here, we're going to take that and move it to the very bottom. Okay, so it's kind of a cycle. They go to the top, then they get moved to the very bottom, and then they work their way back to the top, and so forth. So we could do this.children, once again, li first, and append to ul.css, margin top, and we're going to reset the margin top back to 0 to make sure that it doesn't have a negative value, and then let's fade it in over 300 milliseconds. So let's look over this, get the ul.children, get the very first item, and append to. So many people don't know, we are using append to probably not like you normally would, but it works. It's actually how it was intended to work. When you grab an item and you append it, you are literally moving it from one location to another. So in this case, we're taking the one that's on the very top and we're appending it to the very bottom. And I just paused. It really shouldn't be UL because that would append it to every unordered list. It should be appended to this, the unordered list that was passed in. And then finally, .css, we're resetting the margin and fading it in. So probably on my own, I would clean this up just a little bit, but we're kind of short on time, so you can do that on your own time. So let's go and view this in the browser. Let me open Chrome this time. Localhost, come on down to News Scroller. And we're getting an error. So let's figure out what the problem is, and it's actually very easy, I bet. If we come back to index, we're calling news scroll, but we've made no reference to our plugin. So let's go ahead and add that right now. And it's jQuery.newsScroll.js. Well, let's come back. I think that looks good. Let's look over. It's got to be something small. Widget.newsScroll. That's right. Imported rights. Text/Java. Yep, look. Okay, one more time. Let's try it again. And now it's going. So at the very top, the margin is going up, negative whatever is set, and then it's being taken off and it's being appended to the very bottom. So here we only have 3, but if we want, we could take in the first 15 items, come back, refresh the page, and easy as that, now we're pulling in the very first 15 items from the website. Okay, so that's been your tutorial for the week. Please feel free to ask any questions that you might have. And if you want to download the source code, after I turn this off, I'm going to clean up this because it's a little sloppy, but you're free to do the same, and I will see you next week. See you later. Bye-bye.